And now, Focus on the Pines with your host, Jack Barnes.
Hi, I'm Jack Barnes, and welcome to Focus on the Pines, where we bring you news, views, and interesting people from in and around Ocean Pines. Today's guest is the newly elected president of the Ocean Pines Board of Directors, Dave Stevens. Dave, welcome to Focus on the Pines.
Thank you, Jack.
Now, from our conversation before, I understand that you're basically a northern New Jersey boy. You grew up around Jersey City or in Jersey City. You went to a Jesuit high school and moved on and got a physics degree from St. Peter's, which is also a Jesuit school. I think we can say, if you'd agree, that you have a pretty sound educational grounding.
I hope so.
Yeah, it sounds like. Now, give us a little insight. Your wife Mary, we've seen her around, certainly around the Pines. I understand you met her in school?
I met her while I was in college, and we started dating towards the end of my senior year. And we're married in, I guess, about 7 months after I graduated.
Well, now I think our viewers want to know how you met her now. She wasn't just walking down the street one day, was she?
No, not exactly. She was in nursing school at the time, and coming from an all-men's college, we pretty much had to hit the girls' schools in the area. So I was out at one of her nursing school dances when we met.
That's great. Now, I understand you didn't want to let Mary go, so you proposed to her in the senior year and you became engaged then?
Yes, that's exactly right. And 6 months, or actually the day after we came back from our honeymoon, we left New Jersey, headed up to Massachusetts, and actually, aside from visits, haven't been back to New Jersey since.
Is that right? Now, I take it the move up to Massachusetts, and that was in the Boston area?
Yes.
Was a career-related type move?
Yeah, I was working for Sperry Gyro as a field engineer and working on the first all-guided missile cruiser out of Boston Navy Shipyard. So they transferred me up. Did allow me to have a week honeymoon before they shipped me out, though.
Oh, that's great. And then you found your way somehow, eventually, back into Maryland.
Yeah, we moved into Montgomery County in '63, and we lived there actually until we retired and moved down here in 2001.
Now, you ended up in your various company moves. You were with a small company, but I understand that was bought out by, was it Ball Corporation?
Yeah, I started managing the Washington office for a very small San Diego-based company called Verac. I guess you call it a high-tech company, and did very well, and eventually was bought by the Ball Corporation. Ball Aerospace, I should point out, the Ball Corporation is the same one that makes all of those cans.
That's what we all think about, the canning company, right?
The canning company and canning jars, but it has what I think is now about an $800 million aerospace business, and at one time, the way I like to explain it, they make cans, but they also put all of the instruments on the Hubble Space Telescope.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Now, you and Mary had some children along the way?
Yes, we have two adopted children, son David, who's now about 40, and daughter Jennifer, who has and we have three grandchildren through Jennifer. She's lives over on the Western Shore, so we get to see her often. David is out in Indiana now.
He's a little further away.
He's a little further away.
Now, how did you, I'm going to guess that like a lot of folks I run into that are Marylanders, they discovered Ocean Pines because they vacationed in Ocean City through the years. Was that kind of the route you and Mary took?
Yeah, exactly. Back in the 60s, I'd say mid to late 60s, we started coming down to Ocean City instead of going back up to the Jersey Shore where we usually vacation. And it turned out that when my family came down, my mother and father, some cousins, and they all liked Ocean City pretty well. And Mary heard about Ocean Pines and sort of made one of her pronouncements that we get from time to time.
They do say the wives drive our lives in some sense.
And at certain intervals, that's exactly right. And she decided she wanted a place down here, so we bought a lot from Boise.
This was in the 70s.
This was in '71, I believe.
Okay, not too long after the Ocean Pines got started in '68.
No, we were in one of those couples that were driven around where they had the announcements about the lots being sold. Oops, another one was sold.
Right,
You know,
yes.
sign up fast. So.
And then you sold that lot at one point, and you bought a home?
We actually we did sell the lot. I can't remember the exact timing, but Mary made her other pronouncement is, I'm tired of looking at this lot, and said, you know, so basically I came down, looked around, and decided that rather than build on the lot, I'd look for a house that was already there. And it made it a lot easier on me, not being able to get down here often to watch
Sure.
the building go up. So we bought a house in '78, and
So you had, like a lot of us, you had a vacation home in Ocean Pines, but then there came a point when it happened to all of us as well, where retirement looms, and you decide you're going to make it permanent in Ocean Pines. Was there any pronouncement by Mary at that point?
yes, exactly. Well, I'm going to retire, but I don't know what you're going to do. But I'm going to Ocean Pines. And we actually looked a number of places to retire, and we just couldn't find a single place that we thought was any better than here. And we like Ocean Pines a lot, obviously.
Now you had a home here, but you ended up living in the park. How did that come about?
Pure chance. We had been looking at several other locations. We had an idea about what type of house we wanted, a pretty good idea. And we had an idea that we wanted to be someplace where we could look out and see water and see trees. We're not boaters, so that wasn't a big factor. And we just wandered into the Centex trailer and actually ended up being the second person to put a down payment on a lot of the park.
Right?
We found the lot, we found the house, and the rest of it worked out very well too.
So you're a park old timer, but there must have come a point then when you ended up on the board of the park where you decided, I think I'd like to get involved, and I understand that came about a little bit over some assessment concerns in the park?
Yeah, we started out with the typical, get them in the door low assessment, which was rapidly shooting up, and there were town meetings, and people were protesting or trying to figure out what you could do about it. And I guess it dawned on me, never having lived in an association before, that these people, Centex and Slenker, were going to be gone, and then it was up to everybody that was in the room with me to figure out what we were going to pay for and how much it was going to cost. And so that's when I started to take an interest.
And then you became president of the park board.
Yeah, I ran Centex and Slenker, I think, were very smart about moving residents into the board. I was elected the first board member. It was a 5-person board. I was the only resident board member, and Centex and Slenker filled in the rest of the slots. Subsequently to that, in the second go-around, I was elected again, and then elected via the residents as president. So there was a 5-member board as opposed to the 7 that we have in Ocean Pines.
Well, then, what on earth made you decide to jump off the deep end and say, I think I'm going to run for the Ocean Pines Board of Directors?
Well, it was a pretty controversial time in Ocean Pines.
Must have been the community hall.
It had a lot. The community hall, the pool, $150 assessment increase. There was a lot of angst at that point in time. I was at the community hall town meeting, and somebody up in the front of the room, I don't remember if it was a director or Tom Olson, asked the room, well, how many people in this room are running for the board? And no hands went up. And so after the meeting, I felt, I thought about that, and I said, if you really, really have problems with this, you should try and do something about it. So actually, I went in the next day and signed up. I think the only person that signed up before me was Bill Rayco.
Is that right? Now, you mentioned before that there was a woman at the meeting that had a ticket to speak?
Yeah.
And she kind of handed it to you?
She did. I was just standing there in the back in that big mob, of people back there, and she says, "Here, go up and talk." And I guess, it's funny. I didn't recognize her right away, but I think she was from the park, and she probably knew how I felt about the community hall.
So that was the beginning. You ran for the board. You won. When you ended up on the Ocean Pines board, what would you say was your biggest revelation as being a board member?
Oh, I knew it was an added level of complexity. But you're really talking about almost an order of magnitude. To a certain extent, all of the things that I did in the park are things that you do in any association, and certainly in Ocean Pines. But certainly not the number of, fairly significant issues that have to be dealt with, and almost on a regular basis. Certainly there's a lot more work.
Anything that stands out so far as like the biggest frustration?
Well, I don't know if I call it a frustration, but there's a realization that things aren't going to happen overnight. You might think that, look, I've only got 3 years, let me go in and we'll try and change this and this. And you would like things to go faster. But in fact, you can't. They can't go faster. And you do have to take your time. So, yeah, but the important thing in my mind is that you're making progress. In other words, you've done more today than you had a week ago or 6 months ago. And I think, we can say that.
Well, that's a good point, Dave. And you see, maybe I want to tell our viewers, since you've been a board member and now you are the president of the board, do you see any advantages in being president of the board that you did not have as a board member?
Only if you could call twice as many meetings and twice as many emails an advantage. I think to a certain extent, you have to look at it as a job and work, and what you're really trying to do, and what does take more time, is to make sure that all of the points of view of a 7-person board are on the table, and that everybody understands them, and that trying to drive towards a focus of what the actual issue is so that you can make a decision, or we all can make a decision on it. And I really think that's the primary job of the president. That, of course, in serving as a primary interface with the general manager.
Yeah, and that's probably important. You bring that up. I noticed over the years, and I didn't realize it at first, that the board president really has that connection with the general manager. So his communication with the rest of the board is important, because you might be privy to some things that just happen to come up in general discussion that others are not, and that seems to be an important link.
That's really important, and it's also important to share the information, and that's something that you sort of have to train yourself mentally to do, because it's a day-to-day thing. It's not like every 2 weeks you run into the general manager or go into the office or anything like that. You're constantly going to committee meetings, meeting with the general manager or other board members. It's not just a once-a-month board meeting. So getting that information out to everybody is a critical thing. The other thing, though, I should point out, though, is that the president may be the official primary interface with the general manager, but every board member can walk into the general manager's office just about at any time and ask him a question. And the same thing is true with the staff. And that really should happen. It's important that they get this information firsthand.
Well, I think if we had this was a talk show, we could probably field 100 calls here from property owners wanting to know this or that. But maybe we can talk just a little bit about what you see as a board president, also as the board members, as some of the short-term goals. First, I will talk short-term goals that you're looking at, things you'd like to get accomplished in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think it's good to emphasize the short term, because I think the important thing is to finish what we've started. And I think there's a reasonably good list of things to be done. First and foremost is the community hall and its renovation. You know, I almost want to knock wood, but I mean, so far I think we've made excellent progress on that, and I believe it's going to pass the referendum, and I believe we're going to proceed with it and have perhaps for the first time in Ocean Pines, not counting the library or the post office, you know, an actual new facility, which is going to have a lot more utility than the old hall did. So getting that through, getting that done is first and foremost in my mind. But there are a number of other things that are important. Coming up with a solution, I think, to the food and beverage issue is an important thing, and one that's being addressed currently by the board. Some things that people might look at as administrative, but are really pretty important, is for the first time going through the book of resolutions, and as Bill Rayco has taken on himself, you know, a really tough chore to do, and that's now in the hands of the bylaws committee to work on. So that's moving along. Coming up with goals and objectives, I think, is another important thing. But in my mind, too, we need to re-look at our budgeting process, and coupled to that, we need to look at the reserve issue and how we've used the reserves in the past, how we really should be using the reserves in the future. And so I'd put those pretty close to the top of the near-term goals of things that we haven't really started to address yet. I didn't mention the 10-year plan, not because I think it's not important, but I think unless we understand our budgeting and unless we understand our reserves, we're not going to make much progress on that.
It's difficult, I think, any time with long-term plans.
Yes.
I think I've seen that, and just so many things change, but to focus on the short term. And let me ask you something about the short term, try to be fair about this question, because I know in the community, you know, we have this situation with golf, and I know the board's been working with trying to reduce the golf losses and come up with a way to do that, and of course the yacht club is part of that situation. We seem to have a couple different views on amenities relative to our amenities to be something that is absorbed, losses get absorbed by the community. Should they break even? Are amenities supposed to make money? What are the property owners supposed to kind of make? Can you give us a feel for what the position of the board of directors and the management is at this time in Ocean Pines towards amenities?
I think there are differing views on the board of directors, and it's almost like a spectrum. You can have somebody on one side who feels that they should be predominantly, if not entirely, user-paid and user-driven. I think many other people feel that, in fact, these amenities, including their operational costs, so we'll put that in there, should be absorbed by the greater community because they in fact value everybody, whether they use them or not. So the board itself, I think, has to wrestle with trying to find a balance for that. Historically, you know, I've looked back through some of the other attempts that we've had to outsource the yacht club, for an example, and you know, you can see very clearly at those times that they were looked at as amenities which needed to be subsidized. And I think that's been the general case. The golf course has gone up and down. At one time when we had a high membership, the golf course was a net contributor to the operating fund. But for the last few years, as membership has gone down, it's the subsidy of the golf course, that is to say the operational funds, has increased. It is a community golf course. Membership provides most of the revenues for the golf course right now. But it's kind of interesting, since we've had the new system, someone has been looking into it. I can say Bob Kessler, and pulling information out as to who's actually using it. And it turns out that if resident use of the golf course, I'm not talking about members, but non-member residents accounted for something like 38% of the use.
Wow, it seems a little surprising to me. I mean, being that high, were you surprised?
It's, well,
or
not entirely, but I guess, yeah, I guess I was, to be honest, pleasantly surprised. And that doesn't include outside play, of which is a much smaller part. When I say outside play, non-residents of Ocean Pines. So I think the push towards making it, I don't want to say less a member course, but more a community course is really important. And at the same time, marketing outside play and to boost our revenues is important too. I think, you know, we have to do the best we can to reduce the subsidies of all of our amenities.
Okay. And let me just do one follow-up with that, because I had always been under the understanding that it was sort of this situation where capital expenses would get picked up by all the property owners, but it might be expected for users of an amenity to pick up operational cost. Is that philosophy still there, or is that somewhat changed, or is that just a goal that's looked at?
Oh, I think the philosophy is still there. I think basically you should use that as a target. But you have to look at what the alternatives are if you don't make the goal. And you know, you've heard, I'm sure, some of the more draconian suggestions, like, you know, pave over the golf course and turn it into a parking lot, or you know, people who don't understand what the some thousand homes lining the golf course might think about that. And the same thing is with the yacht club. Well, if we can just simply lease it out for $1 a year, we'd be saving $140,000 in operational costs.
That's not the case?
As a matter of fact, no. It's not really the case. I mean, let me put it this way, it's an oversimplification. It's an oversimplification, because we have to look at what the actual terms of such an agreement might be, and it does take two parties to agree to anything.
That's true.
And you'd have to look at what the actual costs are. Now, we are looking at that, and we're trying to examine exactly what a reasonable agreement might be. And but it's an oversimplification to say you can just do it like that. It's not.
And of course, you have seven board members and probably different opinions among group, which makes it, I guess it's, in a sense, it's a safety valve. On the other hand, it can make it difficult to get things done, unlike a individual that owns, whether it be a golf course or a restaurant. He can just say, here's what we're doing. It's difficult, it's hard, and expertise has to come from someplace as well.
I really don't think the board is the problem. I mean, I think that, I mean, the fact that we've got differences of opinion on the board, I mean, we still get together an awful lot and basically see, you know, come to some form of agreement and make some form of a decision. I don't really believe that the board is the issue. The problem is that the problem is, it's a difficult situation to resolve. And there aren't just solutions that you can pull out of the air and say, yeah, this one's going to work. It's harder than that. So I think you're making progress towards that. You know, we'll see what happens this coming year as far as food and beverage goes. I think the golf is headed in the right direction, at least in terms of trying to balance more or get more outside play and more revenues in. And I think we've made, in the same way with the community hall, I think we don't have a solution that will satisfy everybody, but it's a pretty good compromise.
Oh, good. Now, let me ask you, I've always thought this, even for myself, if I was on a board. You come into the board, obviously we all have personal ideas we'd like to have for our community. For lack of a better word, maybe an agenda. I know that gets negativity connected with it. But how do you separate those personal ideas and things you want to get done relative to what might be best for all the property owners when you're in a position of actually being able to make the decisions?
Well, I think you have to have a little humility and say that, you know, you really don't know what's best for all of the property owners. Nor, moreover, is it possible even to figure that out? I mean, basically they elect you to make the decisions on their behalf, and you try and make the best decisions that you possibly can. In terms of having agendas, I don't know. My personal one, kind of, as I was running for election, was to start a communications committee. Now, I honestly don't know how that's working out. They're kind of feeling their way right now. But I do believe that it's the right thing to do, and in the long term, it will be a positive benefit to Ocean Pines. But things don't happen overnight either. So.
Well, that's true. And with all the difficulties that we face and all the problems and the issues that you have to address in the future, Ocean Pines is still it's a great place to live. Sometimes we forget that when we're getting all involved. But this is look at all the things that we do have access to and the capability of doing and where we are living, and you know, that's why we all moved down here.
Yes, it certainly is. And yeah, I remember sitting on after some meeting, maybe even a contentious one with Bill Rayco and another board member, I can't remember, and a couple of committee members were sitting on the deck at the yacht club and having lunch and looking out and saying, yeah, this is really terrible, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Dave, for joining us today, and we know that you have a difficult job. We certainly thank you for your volunteer service. Remind our viewers that the Board of Directors, it's a volunteer position. You put in many, many hours. I think you mentioned you had 7 meetings this week. Yeah. Not normal, but still it happens. And we appreciate that, and we look forward to good things coming from the board. And we thank you for taking the time today to come here and explain to our viewers a little bit more about Dave Stevens and what we might be looking forward in the future. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. And if I might just add one thing.
Sure may.
You make it sound like an awful job, but it really isn't. I mean, one of the most significant benefits in even running for election and then being on the board is the number more people that you meet. I mean, really, really great people. And that's a huge benefit of being a director.
And you're so kind, because I'm sure along with that goes a little bit of, hey Dave, we want to talk to you about this problem. Well, that's great. That's a great attitude to have, and probably one of the reasons you were selected as president of the board. And thank you again for coming, and we'd like to thank our viewers. We hope you've enjoyed hearing a little more from Dave Stevens, president of the Ocean Pines Board of Directors. Thank you for viewing. This is Jack Barnes for Focus on the Pines.